Усім доброго ранку. Ми розпочинаємо роботу у прес-центрі Українського кризового медіа-центру. І наша
We're starting our work, and our first topic is occupied Crimea, no right to protest. Our speakers are Oleksandr Siedov, analyst of the Crimean human rights group, Daria Svyrydova, lawyer of the Ukrainian Helsinki Human Rights Union, Lilia Gamedzhi, a lawyer representing the interests of the persecuted members of Peaceful Assembly in the occupied Crimea, and Tomak, coordinator of the Media Initiative for Human Rights. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for coming. As I very often participate in different briefings, press conferences related to the prisoners of the Kremlin, but today we'll be talking about somewhat different aspect of massive systemic violations of human rights in Crimea, and that's about the fact that there's no right for peaceful assemblies in the Crimea. I would like to first remind you of some chronology. We can be saying that starting from March 2014, there's no right for peaceful protests in the Crimea. And on the 3rd of March, in the beginning of March, Rishat Ametov was kidnapped and then he was killed. Also, numerous other participants of peaceful assemblies, especially pro-Ukrainian assemblies, were kidnapped, and the latest pro-Ukrainian meeting took place on the 15th of March. On the 16th of March, there was the so-called referendum. And after that, everyone who expresses their position, they are persecuted because such actions are qualified as violations. And I believe that the work that has been made by our colleagues is very important, and the figures you will hear are very impressive. And I would like to give the floor to Oleksandr Siedov, who's the analyst of the Crimean human rights group. Good afternoon. The information on violation of human rights in Crimea we've been collecting since 2014. That refers to the violation of the right for peaceful assemblies. We were collecting information from different pieces of information from our monitors and the information provided by lawyers and activists in the Crimea. The decision was made to systematize this information, so we started to collect data from the sites of official sites of so-called courts in the Crimea. We are collecting information on violations of two administrative articles of the Code of the Russian Federation, and these are articles 20.1 and 20.2.2, non-sanctioned peaceful assemblies and peaceful assemblies which resulted in violations. We found information on 268 sentences from the period of 2014 till autumn of 2017. Out of them, 256 people were punished. These were fines, mandatory works, or administrative arrests. Out of them, 235 court's resolutions were about the fines. The total amount of fines is approximately 2,942,000 rubles, taking into account the fact that the average salary, according to the Ministry of Statistics, is 19,000 rubles. It looks like people have to give away a month of their work, a month's salary to pay fines. The maximum sum of fines was 150,000 rubles. Besides there were administrative arrests, and the total amount of days for which people were deprived of freedom is 128 days. Also, besides the cases on which we had information, and these are cases related to demonstrating the Ukrainian or Crimean Tatar identity, like the photographs with the Ukrainian flag, or the cases related to participation in actions at the anniversary of deportation of the Crimean Tatar people, because relatives or friends come to find out what's happening when there is a search in the home. So besides the cases that we knew, we found information on cases about which we knew nothing. One of them is persecution of people for their demonstration of religious demonstrations. The Church of Evangelists was giving away the Easter gifts. All people who participated in them were arrested because they were involved into non-sanctioned assembly. Also, the Krishnaites who were walking along Yalta were detained, and the judge stated that that was an unsanctioned meeting. There are many cases related not to political factors, but related to the fact that people are not happy with the current administration. Two ladies, elderly ladies, were made responsible because two pensioners were detained because they were discussing the issue that there's no electricity for 2 days in their homes. One of them was fined, another one had to exercise some mandatory works. So basically, they take to responsibility everyone who participates in the meeting which is not sanctioned by the authorities. It's irrespective of what is their political position, irrespective of what is their religious views, but most
Да, кроме того, что
besides the fact that the people are made responsible, we did not take into account the facts when they're not, the court doesn't pass a ruling about responsibility, but the peaceful meeting was closed by the law enforcement body. One of the cases is when there were representatives of the Communist Party who were trying to lay flowers to the monument to Lenin, and the law enforcement bodies detained people because they believed that they were participating in unsanctioned meeting, but the court justified them. This same court find some other people who were trying to put flowers to the monument, but they did not find these. Besides collecting information on the violations, we collected information on persons who are involved into violations and information about judges. Some judges, like German Tomanyuk, issued 16 resolutions. The total amount of fines, 200,000 rubles. Many judges of the Supreme Court of Crimea passed decisions that confirm the cases, and in these cases the sum of fines is several 100,000 rubles per judge. You see this information on the table. You see people who passed most of the rulings.
Доброго дня, колеги. Мене звати Daria Svyrydova.
Good afternoon, Daria Svyrydova. I'm a lawyer of the Ukrainian Helsinki Human Rights Union, and from the start of Crimean occupation, we pay a lot of attention of protecting human rights of those individuals who stay in the occupied territories, and we saw repressive mechanism of persecution, because some people participated in peaceful gatherings in the territory of Peninsula. I would like to say that with the annexation of Peninsula, and they spread repressive legislation that regulates peaceful gatherings, and any peaceful gathering and expression of the opinion through participation in meetings is outside the law now and persecuted by occupation power, and in the framework of administrative and criminal legislation of Russian Federation. And my colleague said that in these 3 years, about 300 cases were recorded in administrative cases for the participation of peaceful gatherings, and also we may state that such mechanism as criminal persecution for participation in peaceful gatherings is also massively used for the participants of peaceful gatherings starting 2014 till now. And the aim of this persecution, maybe two main aims we trace. This is the systemic policy by Russian Federation to suppress any opposition to the power that controls Crimea, and also to establish total support of occupation Russian power in Crimea, and not to allow the leak of information that in the territory of Peninsula there are still people who disagree what is going on there, and also the mechanisms of administrative and criminal persecutions. This is a cooling effect. This is a strong message for everyone who is in Crimea, that each of you who tries to express the opinion, these people will be inevitably punished. And I would like to draw attention to some brutal intrusions in the peaceful gatherings and the opening of criminal cases against them, and there were two big cases about on persecution. First cases of the 3rd of May, and on the 3rd of May of 2014, Crimea Tatar community went to the administrative border to meet Mustafa Dzhemilev, and for this about 200 people were brought to administrative responsibility, and as a consequence there were 4 criminal convictions concerning the participants of this gathering, and also 1 case of 26th of February. And this is an unprecedented case when people were brought to responsibility, those who participated in peaceful gatherings. It happened on the 26th of February 2014. And near the Verkhovna Rada of Crimea, there were 2 peaceful gatherings, one to support territorial integrity of Ukraine, and the second one with the message of free, independent Crimea and the entering of Crimea to Russian Federation. So, and as a consequence of these events, after the peninsula was next to the occupation power, 9 people, and we should understand that these charges were made for massive riots, but these charges were made against pro-Ukrainian participants and Crimean Tatar representatives. And all those who suffered in this criminal case, they were the participants of the other meeting, parallel meeting, that was pro-Russian, and the representatives of law enforcement bodies. And this meeting was held on the 26th of February, and Russia didn't saw itself as those who control this territory, and there were other grave violations of human rights and politically motivated persecution of Crimean Tatar people who participated in pro-Ukrainian meeting, and this is a strong message to those who tried to massively demonstrate against occupation, that it demonstrates to them that everyone will be punished. And this case is ongoing. Several cases are still heard by courts in the territory of Crimea, and 3 convictions were made in this case. One to Majlis participant Akhtem Chergozov, who was convicted and sentenced in this case. So, and in other cases, our lawyers addressed to European courts, and we hope that these legal measures and these institutions will assess these actions concerning peaceful gatherings. And I would like to draw your attention to one important aspect, what Ukraine can do in this case. As I've said, the participants of peaceful gatherings also become political prisoners. They are imprisoned, and Artem Chigozov is such an example how you can become a prisoner just for participating in the peaceful gathering. But now at the legislative level, the problem is still unsolved, how to help the families of political prisoners. A lot of sad and these political prisoners of Crimea, they are left alone without any support, one-on-one with their problems. And now Ukraine should support political prisoners of the Kremlin, to support them socially and financially. And what is important, that each of these political prisoners, they should understand that they are not left behind, and that Ukraine will fight for all of them. And we hope that this message will be heard, and the draft law that is now registered at the Supreme Council about the support of the families and political prisoners, that it will be voted for, and political prisoners will see real steps concerning their support by Ukrainian power. Thank you. Good afternoon, Lilia Gamedzhi. So I do not have relation to this infographics, but I help those who are convicted in Crimea, and we defend them in courts, and we didn't win any case with our colleagues. So this is all these cases are politically motivated. I would like to tell you about practical things, how this persecution of activists is going on, how active people are persecuted, how court rulings are made to bring people to administrative or criminal responsibility. As of today, one of the latest case was the detention of Bakhchera Saraysiks, Arsen Makhmatovich and Nalimovich. These two people were persecuted by power of Crimea for a long time, starting May 2016. And they are persecuted for their active position, and today's persecution of these people is the logical continuation of administrative persecutions by power in Crimea. And in Saliyev and Asanov case, the first was when they were brought to administrative responsibility for non-sanctioned meeting with at the Zalachi cafe. Arsalan was not allowed to enter the cafe when the search was made, and the organizer was named as Zananov, and they were brought to administrative responsibility, and they were heavily fined, but they continued to highlight the events in Crimea, and they continued to express the opinion that differed from the opinion of Crimean authorities. Then Saliyev Siran was brought to administrative responsibility concerning two articles, and there were searches in his house. His children were frightened, and Arsen Marlenov, they had a series of different checks by prosecutor's office, by emergency services, by and they said that if you do not stop to speak, if you continue to express your opinion, you'll be pressured even more. So as of today, we see criminal persecution of these people for their active civil position. Saliyev and Asanov, they were active people, and they had influence outside Bakhchesar as well, and in all Crimea they knew these people. So this case is not only Basanov and Liv, but there is deep interest of Crimean power, and while attending court hearings, before court hearing, we repeatedly saw that on the monitors of the assistants of the judge, and even the judges, they had on their computers ready-made decisions that people committed some administrative violations, people who were persecuted for these peaceful gatherings. And if we analyze it, this is copy-paste, so they do not change names or surnames, or and the characteristics that are presented by police. This is also copy-paste. And in Saliyev case, there was a characteristic, and in the headline it was said that that Mustafayev, Roman Yagyevich, and the continuation of negative characteristics. So I brought attention of the judge that this characteristic is not about my defendant, but he said that despite there is a name of Mustafayev, this is not serious, that that the essence, that the characteristic corresponds to Saliyev. And
this is not funny, but this happens during each hearing in the court. We see when we interrogate the law enforcement servicemen, we ask the question, how have you identified that these are all the citizens who are Crimean Tatars? And the judge does not allow the policeman to answer and says, well, they all look alike, all Crimean Tatars look alike. Don't even take time and don't try to find some signs which would differentiate them. The policemen demonstrate, I cannot even find the word, they are just illiterate when they are making the documents, drafting the documents. There was Servier Karametov, the old person of 76, who received who was arrested, received administrative arrest, and the policeman drafted the protocol on the examination of the place of the accident, and the policeman said that he did it to register the confiscation of the slogan with which Elimetov was standing. And the policeman said that he's a serviceman and he himself can decide on which type of document he will draft. This non-professionalism shows that these cases have the decided the result. The judge doesn't have a choice whether to justify the person or not, but they have the choice of what should be the punishment. It's either the fine from 10 to 20,000 or number of days of administrative arrest. Everything is pre-planned, and the judge knows in advance how every case should finish. There are many cases like that in Crimea, and we are concerned with that as well as the whole international community is concerned. But despite that, people who are in Crimea, they are ready to confirm that. And the confirmation of that is the 14th of October, when many people came out with pickets with the attempt to demonstrate not just to Crimean authorities but to the whole world that Crimean Tatars are not terrorists. The first one was Servier Karametov, and at the moment of during the court proceedings, he came out to people who came to support him. He said, I shouldn't come out, I shouldn't be the only one who will come out. When there will be many of us, they will not be able to detain all of us. First there was Servier Karametov, then 8 more elderly persons. Now there are more than 100 people. How many there will be tomorrow, we can just guess. Crimean Tatar people, Crimean Muslims, are loyal to their position, and they will demonstrate and they will prove by peaceful means that they're not terrorists, and they want to live in Crimea peacefully in good neighborly relations with other nations. And this is not the basis, the ground for persecution. In the appeals, we always, in the court of the first and the second instance, we are always trying to explain to the judges the norms of European court and the norms of the European Convention and the position of the European Court on such issues, despite the fact that it is always ignored by the courts. I believe this will have importance when such cases are considered in the European Court on Human Rights. We believe that these cases have the perspective in the European Court on Human Rights, and this court will give assessment to all the events which are taking place in Crimea today. Thank you. Dear colleagues, do you have any questions?
Якщо запитань
Once there are no questions, then maybe some final remarks from our speakers.
Власне,
basically, I believe I believe I'm not mistaken if I say that the colleagues will continue following all the violations, and I will say that we had to update this infographics because almost every day number of people who are made responsible. First of all, it refers to administrative violations. Their number goes up, but I believe that very soon, I don't know whether it will be soon or not, but the dozens of cases that were submitted to the European Court on Human Rights, I believe that will see the rulings, and the European Court will give the assessment to this situation. And I would like to support my colleague Dasha Svyrydova, who said that Ukraine needs to support those people who de facto, even though officially they are detained for sort of terroristic accusations, but we understand that's just the instrument to get rid of those who occupational authorities do not want. And we are supporting the approval of the draft law, and we are supporting the creation of the state institution, which would coordinate the efforts of the state institutions and civil society organizations. Thank you. So this is it. Thank you.